faith in the flames, where God found me. Imagine sitting in your car in the middle of a Walmart parking lot in Houston, Texas, staring blankly at the steering wheel while the world moves around you. The sun is blazing, but you feel cold. You're surrounded by people, families laughing, carts rattling, engines humming, but you feel invisible. You haven't cried yet, but your chest is tight, like your soul is holding its breath. That was me. My name is Rebecca, and before I ever saw healing, I lived through heartbreak. Before I ever found peace, I wrestled with pain. And before I ever met Jesus in the fire, I stood in the middle of it, scorched, silent, and scared. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had just left another doctor's appointment with nothing but a heavier heart and a thinner wallet. "We'll keep monitoring," they said. "No answers yet." I had heard that line so many times it echoed in my sleep. My body was failing me, and no one could tell me why. I was 32 years old, single and living in a borrowed guest room in my cousin's house. My savings were gone, my strength was fading, and my faith, it was hanging by a thread. I had applied for over 40 jobs in the past 2 months. Not one callback, not one interview. I used to be a marketing manager at a tech startup in Austin. Now I was Googling how to sell plasma for cash and rationing my medication. I sat in that car for over an hour. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared. My phone buzzed, a text from my mom. "Still praying for you, baby." I couldn't bring myself to reply. What was I supposed to say? That I felt like God had forgotten me, that I wasn't sure I believed anymore. I looked up at the sky through the windshield. It was cloudless, beautiful, mocking. "God," I whispered, "if you're real, do something." But nothing happened. No voice, no sign, just the sound of a shopping cart bumping into the curb nearby. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, I wanted to disappear, but I didn't. I stayed. I breathed. I clenched the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to this world. And somehow, I didn't break. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that silent, painful, ordinary moment was the beginning of my testimony. Because sometimes the fire doesn't announce itself. It just burns. And sometimes God doesn't shout. He waits. This is my story. And if you've ever felt like you were drowning in daylight, I want you to know, you're not alone. Because the fire didn't consume me, it revealed the God who walks in it. I didn't always feel like this. There was a time I walked into rooms with confidence, not shame. A time when my calendar was full, my bank account stable, and my health, well, I didn't think twice about it. I was living in Austin, working at a fast-growing tech startup, leading campaigns, mentoring interns, and dreaming big. I had plans. I had purpose. But life doesn't ask for permission before it unravels. It started with fatigue, just a little at first. Then came the headaches, the dizzy spells, the weight loss. I brushed it off. Stress, I told myself, but the doctor's face said otherwise. "We need to run more tests," he said. That was the beginning of the spiral. The symptoms crept in slowly, like shadows lengthening at dusk. I'd wake up exhausted even after sleeping 10 hours. Simple tasks felt overwhelming. The job I loved became a burden I couldn't carry. I missed deadlines. I forgot meetings. I couldn't focus. My hands would shake during presentations. My team noticed, but no one said anything directly. They didn't have to. I could see it in their eyes, concern mixed with frustration. Eventually, they let me go, with compassion, they said. But compassion doesn't pay rent. I remember the day I packed up my desk. It was a Friday afternoon. I walked out of that building carrying a cardboard box filled with awards, coffee mugs, and shattered dreams. The Austin skyline looked different that day. Less like promise, more like judgment. I moved to Houston to stay with my cousin, thinking it would be temporary. Just a few weeks to get back on my feet, but weeks turned into months. My savings vanished faster than I expected. Medical bills piled up. Insurance didn't cover half of what I needed. Every doctor's visit cost money I didn't have. Every test revealed nothing, which somehow felt worse than a diagnosis. I applied to jobs obsessively. Marketing manager, marketing coordinator, social media manager, content writer. I wasn't picky anymore. I just needed something, anything. But my resume had a gap now. Employers asked questions I couldn't answer honestly. Why did you leave your last position? How do you explain that your body betrayed you, that you couldn't trust yourself anymore? The rejections came in form emails. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Each one felt like confirmation that I was disposable, forgettable, broken beyond repair. My cousin was kind. She never asked when I'd leave, but I felt the weight of my presence every day. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just surround you, it lives inside you. I remember one night, lying on the floor of the guest room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. I hadn't spoken to anyone all day, not because no one called, but because I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to explain again that I was still sick, still unemployed, still waiting. Still failing. The room was dark except for the streetlight bleeding through the curtains. I could hear my cousin and her husband laughing in the living room. Their life continued. Mine had stopped. I thought about the person I used to be, the girl who led teams, who had ideas, who mattered. Where had she gone? Had I imagined her? Was she ever real? My phone sat on the nightstand face down. 6 missed calls, 10 unread texts. I couldn't face them. I had stopped going to church, not because I stopped believing, but because I couldn't bear the questions. How are you? Felt like a dagger. We're praying for you felt like a reminder that nothing had changed. People meant well, I knew that, but their faith felt loud and mine felt silent. They talked about breakthroughs and blessings while I was drowning in the deep end. Their testimonies were victories. Mine was just survival. I avoided the parking lot on Sundays. I'd hear the worship music from my room, muffled through walls. Sometimes I'd cry. Sometimes I'd feel nothing at all. God felt distant, not angry, just absent, like he'd moved on to people with simpler problems, people whose faith wasn't fractured, people who deserved miracles. I wasn't angry at him, I was just tired of waiting, tired of hopping, tired of pretending I was okay. I opened my Bible once that week. It fell open to Psalm 13. How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? I stared at the words, my vision blurred. For the first time in weeks, I cried. Not the quiet tears I'd grown used to, but the kind that shake your body and soak your soul. I whispered, I don't know how to keep going. The words felt like confession, like surrender, like the last honest thing I had left to give. And still silence. No comfort, no peace, just the sound of my own breaking. I closed the Bible and pushed it away. If God was listening, he wasn't answering, and I didn't have the strength to keep asking. I curled up on the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. The carpet smelled like laundry detergent and failure. I stayed there until morning. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I had just gotten off the phone with the clinic. Another test, another bill, another we're not sure. The receptionist's voice was mechanical. Clinical, she didn't know she was delivering another piece of my hope. I hung up and stared at the wall. The room started spinning, my chest tightened, my vision blurred, I couldn't breathe. It felt like drowning on dry land, like the walls were closing in, like my body was finally giving up the fight I'd been losing for months. I dropped to the floor, gasping, clutching my chest, convinced I was dying. My hands went numb. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I tried to call out, but no sound came. Just gasping, just panic, just the certainty that this was the end. My cousin rushed in. She found me on the floor, hyperventilating, unable to speak. She called 911 immediately. Within minutes, paramedics filled the guest room. They asked questions I couldn't answer. They checked my vitals. They loaded me onto a stretcher. The ambulance ride was a blur. Sirens, lights, strangers hovering. I remember thinking, this is how it ends, in the back of an ambulance alone. At the ER, they ran tests. Heart monitor, blood work, EKG, everything came back normal. Panic attack, the doctor said, stress-induced. I wanted to laugh. Panic attack, like my body had finally screamed what my soul had been whispering for months. I can't do this anymore. They kept me for observation. My cousin sat beside the bed, holding my hand. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. Her presence was enough. But I felt more alone than ever. That night, lying in a hospital bed under fluorescent lights, I felt the full weight of my failure. Machines beeped. Nurses moved quietly through the halls, and I stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was it. If this was how my story ended, not with triumph, but with collapse. I didn't pray that night. I didn't have the strength. But somewhere deep inside, buried beneath the fear and exhaustion, a whisper remained. Don't let go. I didn't know where it came from. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was just my stubborn will refusing to quit. Either way, it was all I had. I closed my eyes and held onto that whisper like a lifeline. Morning came slowly. Gray light filtered through the hospital window. I was alive. Broken, but alive. And that had to count for something. It happened the next morning. I was discharged, weak but stable. My cousin drove me home in silence. No radio, no small talk, just the hum of the engine and the weight of everything unsaid. I walked into the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the Bible on the nightstand. I didn't want to open it, but I did. It fell open to Isaiah 43. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, for I am the Lord your God. I froze. I had read that verse before, but this time it felt different. It felt alive, like it was written just for me, just for this moment. I read it again and again, and something shifted. I didn't hear a voice, I didn't see a vision, but I felt something like warmth in the cold, like light in the dark, like hope breaking through concrete. I whispered, "Are you still here?" And for the first time in months, I believed the answer was yes. Not because everything changed, not because I felt better, but because something inside me recognized truth when I heard it. God hadn't left. He'd been in the fire with me all along. I just couldn't see him through the smoke. I couldn't stop thinking about that verse, Isaiah 43. When you walk through the fire, it echoed in my chest like a heartbeat. That morning, I sat on the edge of the bed, Bible in my lap, and whispered, "Okay, God, if you're still here, I'm listening." I didn't expect fireworks. I didn't expect instant healing. I just wanted to feel something other than despair. And slowly, I did. I started journaling again, just a few lines a day, not about my pain, but about what I hoped for. I wrote things like peace, purpose, healing. I didn't believe them yet, but I wanted to. The act of writing felt like prayer, like speaking life over death, like refusing to let the fire have the final word. I started walking around the block each morning. My legs were weak, but the air felt like grace. The sun felt different, less harsh, more kind. I passed the same oak tree every day. One morning, I noticed a tiny green sprout pushing through the sidewalk crack. It was surviving, growing, despite the concrete trying to hold it down. And so was I. I began to see signs of life everywhere. Birds singing, kids laughing, flowers blooming in neighbors' yards. The world hadn't stopped. I had just stopped seeing it. It was a Sunday afternoon when I met her. I had forced myself to go to a small church near my cousin's house. I sat in the back, hoodie up, heart guarded. I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to sit in the presence of something holy, even if I didn't feel holy myself. The worship was simple. The sermon was about seasons, about waiting, about God's timing. It felt personal. After the service, a woman named Angela approached me. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes and a voice like honey. She didn't ask me how I was. She just said, "God told me to tell you, he hasn't forgotten." I froze. She didn't know me. She didn't know my story, but her words pierced through every wall I'd built. "He sees you," she said, "and he's walking with you through this." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Angela hugged me, not the quick, polite kind, but the kind that says, "I see your pain and I'm not afraid of it." When she pulled away, she smiled. "You're going to make it, and your story is going to help so many people." That night, I wrote in my journal, "Maybe I'm not alone." I started praying again, not the polished prayers I used to say in church, but raw, messy, honest ones. God, I'm scared. God, I'm tired. God, I don't know what to do. And slowly, those prayers turned into conversations. I began reading the Psalms, not just skimming, but soaking. David's words felt like mine. His cries, his doubts, his hope. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't faithless. I was human. One night, I read Psalm 34. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. I whispered, then you must be really close. Things didn't change overnight. But they started changing. I got a call from a recruiter. Someone had seen my old portfolio online. They wanted to interview me for a remote position. I hadn't worked in months. My confidence was shattered, but I said yes. I prepared for that interview like my life depended on it. I practiced answers. I prayed. I reminded myself that I was still capable. The interview went well. I felt like myself again, articulate, creative, sharp. For 45 minutes, I wasn't sick Rebecca. I was just Rebecca. But I didn't get the job. The rejection email came 2 days later. We've decided to move forward with another candidate. I sat with the disappointment, but this time, I didn't fall apart. Because I saw it differently, it wasn't rejection. It was movement, proof that I wasn't invisible, proof that I could still show up. I started volunteering at the church, helping with social media, organizing events. It wasn't much, but it gave me purpose. It reminded me that I still had something to offer. Angela introduced me to the women's ministry team. They welcomed me with open arms. No judgment, no pity, just acceptance. I designed graphics for their upcoming conference. I wrote captions for their posts. I felt useful again, needed again. And my health, still fragile, but I had energy again. I could walk without pain. I could laugh without guilt. I was still in the fire, but I was no longer afraid of it. One evening, I realized I'd gone an entire day without thinking about my illness. An entire day focused on something bigger than my pain. That was progress, that was healing, not just physical but spiritual. It was a Tuesday morning when I woke up and realized I hadn't cried in weeks. I stood in front of the mirror, looked at my reflection and whispered, "You're still here." I didn't look the same. My face was thinner. My eyes held stories they didn't before, but I was alive, and more than that, I was becoming. I got another interview. This time, I got the job, a remote marketing role with flexible hours and full benefits. I signed the offer letter with trembling hands and a grateful heart. I called my mom. "God did it," I said. She cried. I cried. And for the first time in a long time, those tears felt like rain after a drought. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rising. My first day of work felt surreal. I logged into my new laptop, joined team meetings, and contributed ideas. I was back. I didn't know healing could begin in such quiet ways. It wasn't dramatic. No lightning bolt. No angelic choir. Just a slow, steady warmth growing inside me, like a candle lit in a dark room. I started waking up with a strange sense of expectation. Not because everything was fixed, but because something was different. It started with sleep. For months, I had battled insomnia, tossing, turning, waking up exhausted. But one night I slept, deeply, peacefully. I woke up and cried, not because I was tired, but because I wasn't. Then came the appetite. I could eat again, taste again, enjoy again. My body was still fragile, but it was responding. My doctor noticed. "You're stabilizing," he said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I smiled. I knew what I was doing. I was trusting again. The job was more than a paycheck. It was a reminder that I still had something to give. I worked from home, managing campaigns, mentoring younger marketers, and slowly rebuilding my confidence. My ideas mattered again. My voice mattered again. I started dreaming again, not just about work, but about life, about ministry, about impact. I joined a small group at church. I shared my story. I cried, they cried, and something sacred happened. My pain became someone else's hope. I wasn't just being restored. I was becoming a vessel. One evening, I sat on the porch, watching the Houston sunset paint the sky in gold and lavender. I thought about the hospital bed, the panic attacks, the silence, the fire. And I whispered, "Thank you." Not because everything was perfect, but because I had survived, because I had seen God in the fire. Peace is a miracle, not the absence of problems, but the presence of God in the middle of them. I still had questions. I still had days of weakness, but I had peace, deep, unshakable peace. I started writing devotionals, sharing my testimony, encouraging others who were walking through their own fires. Angela invited me to share my story at a women's gathering at church. I hesitated. I wasn't a preacher. I wasn't polished, but I was willing. I stood before a room full of women, some smiling, some silently weeping, and I told the truth. The hospital bed, the panic, the silence, the verse, the whisper. And when I said, "Jesus met me in the fire," the room went still. Afterward, women came up to me, one by one. "That's my story too. I thought I was alone. You gave me hope." I realized then, the fire wasn't just for me. It was for them too. One night, I was reading John 11, the story of Lazarus, and something struck me. Jesus didn't rush. He waited. He let the pain unfold. He let the questions rise. And then he showed up, not late, but right on time. I whispered, "You waited for me too." And I understood, the delay wasn't denial. It was preparation. God wasn't ignoring me. He was setting the stage for something deeper, something eternal. My healing wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, emotional, purposeful. I wasn't just restored, I was resurrected. The fire had burned away everything that wasn't essential, everything that wasn't real, and what remained was refined, pure, stronger. I had learned that victory doesn't always look like escape. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Sometimes it looks like staying when everything in you wants to run. If you're reading this and you feel like you're in the fire, I want you to know you're not alone. I've been there, in the silence, in the ache, in the questions. But Jesus is still the fourth man in the fire. He still walks into the flames. He still whispers in the dark. He still heals what doctors can't explain. He still restores what life tries to steal. Don't give up. Don't let go. He's closer than you think. This is my testimony, not of perfection, but of persistence, not of escape, but of endurance, not of strength, but of surrender. I refused to break, and God met me in the fire. Now I walk with peace, with purpose, with power, not because I'm strong, but because He is. Your story matters, your voice matters, your healing is coming. Jesus still works wonders, and He's not done with you yet.